Hello and welcome. This is NTA Tuesday Live. I'm Cyril Stover. The convergence of Nigerians in Dubai for the Conference of Parties 28, COP28, extends beyond a typical climate change conference. At this event, the most significant threat to humanity in the current century was under discussion, and over 100,000 delegates from 92 countries worldwide, including scientists, political figures, and business leaders, participated in the discourse. Tonight, NTA Tuesday Live will explore top issues arising from the World Environment Conference. Now, the second part, we do have a second part of the program today, will focus on women inclusion in the security sector. But before we go to our first discussion on COP28, let's get to see this report put together by environment correspondent Charles Alpha.
COP28 was all about negotiations on the key thematic areas and every angle to the issues: financing, loss and damage, energy transition, mitigation and adaptation were all looked at. Negotiators would have to agree with what works for their respective countries, and here lies lots of disagreements. But in the end, views and positions would have to align to have a common front for all.
The global stocktake needs to help all countries get out of this mess. Any strategic landmines that blow it up for one, blow it up for all.
Operationalization of the Loss and Damage Fund was a major win at COP28 for developing countries. But there is one problem.
The Loss and Damage Funds that has been established at the United Nations, it was concluded last year, but we're having a problem of administration. While the developing countries wanted the funds to be domiciled in an agency created newly in the United Nations, the developed countries led by US wanted it to be domiciled in World Bank, which is an issue.
There is also the belief that the developed world, the G7 and G20 countries, are afraid to take action despite the ravaging effect on developing countries, either because of the consequences on their economies or world status. But in all, negligence will not only be detrimental to one, but to all.
But developing countries want easy access because they are the most hit. They contribute less than 4% to the global warming, while the developed countries contribute over 96%. So they are to contribute more into the funds, and the developing countries are to have access so that they can be able to mitigate and introduce adaptation strategies in their various locations.
While that was being debated, protests rocked Expo City Center, venue of COP28. Groups of climate activists and human rights organizations want action, and a quick one for that matter, on ending fossil fuels for green and cleaner energy sources. This is aside the clamor for adoption of science and innovation to fight the escalating weather events.
We're here to say, don't gas Africa. Yeah. We're here to say we care about our continent. We care about our children.
They're here to make sure that the rest of the world sees that they see what's actually happening here. It's not some climate agreement that's actually going to help anything. It's them making oil deals.
For the children of the world, they deserve climate justice. All children all around the world deserve protection. They deserve safety.
As countries rose from Dubai, it is expected that countries that have made commitment will honor them. In order to help developing countries, those worst hit by climate change can have respite for the effects on their countries. Charles Alpha.
That report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. Let me start off by introducing our guests. We'd like to welcome to this program Honorable Sam Onuigbo, who is a member representing the Southeast in the Northeast Development Commission. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you very much.
You should also mention that Honorable Sam Onuigbo chaired the House of Reps Committee on Climate Change from 2015 to 2019. Right.
Oh.
Also joined tonight by Professor Emmanuel Ladipo, who is a climatologist. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Good evening, engineers.
And joining us via Zoom from Lagos is the environmentalist, Engineer Desmond Majekudumi. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
All right. Well, as you know, at some point in time, we might go interactive, and you can join in the discussion in the studio. But let's start off looking at the issues straight away from the studio here. COP28, and the first we'll seek to know is what are the takeaways from COP28 for Nigeria? Honorable Sam Onigbo.
Thank you very much. Good evening, viewers. The takeaways are many, and a lot was achieved. We were able to register our presence very strongly, because in some of the key deliberations that required the heads of government or presidents or climate envoys, our president was present. The other takeaway is that the president was able to exercise leadership, because before now, whenever we were going to COP, it was a question of, okay, this has been said. But he went to the National Assembly, and in reading his budget speech, in paragraphs 23, 24, and 25, he made it clear that he has directed his appointees, ministers, all these other appointees, to go out there and work for Nigeria. He did not stop there. He ensured he was there. And I saw a roster, and I was lucky to be with him in several, about 4 meetings, where he would walk from one meeting hall to the other. So that way, the appointees, the ministers, and all other people, some kept to the roster, some followed him. It was obvious that the president was able to set the pace and the tone of how he wants issues about climate change to be discussed. Another takeaway was that he was able to appoint an interim body chaired by the chairman of FIRS and the Director General of the National Council on Climate Change on the issue of carbon tax, in line with Section 4I of the Climate Change Act for Nigeria. So if you check some of the things that he was able to do, I'll tell you that he was able to activate in a comprehensive manner the Climate Change Act. And coming with that were some of the things we have done. For instance, we were able to get the agreement with Siemens signed. He was there, he witnessed it. We were also able to contribute our own quota in ensuring that the issue of loss and damage funds was operationalized. So there are a number of things that will benefit the nation that happened during so many of them.
All right.
Yeah.
We will explore them in some detail, but let's come to Professor Emmanuel Ladipo. And COP has been going on for some time now, but an interesting development in COP28 was when the participants insisted that all countries must agree, otherwise it's no use. Do we see that now the world is beginning to take these issues more seriously?
Thank you very much. I think briefly within 1 second, let me give you an idea of what the COP is all about. The Conference of Parties is the overall governance for the implementation of what we call the Convention on Climate Change, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which was established in 1992 and for which Nigeria became a member. Once you sign to that convention, you will call a party as a country, not as individual.
And since 1992, the agreement is that every year the world, about 186 countries all over the world, will be meeting to be discussing the various progress that are being made in the implementation of that convention. So the Conference of Parties leads that meeting every year, and it's usually between the months of November and December, depending on the weather conditions of where you're going. Supporting the COP, the Conference of Parties, are two subsidiary bodies, one for technical advice and the other one for implementation. As a result of that, there are many issues that have been discussed. I want to put this one clear. For someone like me that had the opportunity of representing Nigeria between 2009 and 2018, that I have been leading the delegation for the negotiation on adaptation. A major principle of this convention, of this Conference of Parties, is that whatever you are going to take away at the end of the meeting must be agreed by all the 186 countries. Doesn't matter the size of your population, doesn't matter the strength of your economy, it doesn't matter how powerful you are. I remember one instance, I can't remember which one, I think Lima, I can't remember again. We thought we had reached an agreement on the text. And the last minute, I think it was Honduras, and you can't compare Honduras to Nigeria in terms of population, just objected. And that was it. If your country is only one person, as is a country, and you object to any text that comes out of this Conference of Parties, it doesn't hold water. There's nothing like veto, like you do in the UN. There's nothing like I veto this. So we have to recognize that one. And it shows the seriousness of the concern of the whole world, that we are dealing with a major development challenge called climate change that can ruin us if we do not really handle it very well. So it demonstrates the concern of the world, and I'm happy that we're always having to reach a consensus so that we can all move together towards tackling this challenge.
All right, we'll return to the matter of all countries agreeing, because to agree is one step of the way, and not to implement after agreeing is another thing entirely. But we'll return to that. But let's go over to Lagos and link up with the environmentalists, Engineer Des Majakudumi. And you have been in the forefront of drawing attention to the environment for quite some time now. But at all these conferences, there are still some Nigerians who would say, look, what are the major threats to a country like Nigeria, where neither as developed as those countries who are the biggest polluters and who have such reason to worry about? And by the way, they don't seem to be the ones who care much about. But again, others say, well, they are the big polluters, but we suffer the effects more. So let's put it in the context of Nigeria, for instance.
It is very, very worrisome indeed for our wonderful, great country, Nigeria, because we are on the forefront of getting the negative effects of this climate change that has been brought about by global warming, which has been induced by massive pollution. We're talking of hundreds of millions of tons of greenhouse gases, upsetting the wonderful, miraculous balance of our atmospheric gases that makes this Earth the only planet that can support life that we have come across yet. And believe you me, we've been able to identify millions. Unfortunately, Nigeria is not in a good position when it comes to getting the effects of this climate change. We've been seeing it already in the desert areas in the northern part of our country. Lake Chad drying up massively, one of the biggest lakes in the continent. a tiny speck of its original size. I think it's about 10 to 12% of the original size now. Not to mention the desertification, desert just moving in, exacerbated by climate change. I mean, there are other things that have been causing this, but the main driver is the climate change. And then, of course, if that is not bad enough, what of the coastal erosion? Terrible coastal erosion along our coast here, even in Lekki, in this Lagos area. We've lost over 115 meters in 1 year and 3 months, 15 months. So yeah, we are in a terrible position when it comes to that. And then the final blow, most of our agricultural systems are rain-fed. Yes, we have certain irrigations, but we're mainly rain-fed agricultural nation. And when the rains are not coming according to the seasons they're meant to come, it can cause havoc. So yes, we're on the front line of the receiving end of this, but I'm so happy to see that we are standing up now as the giant of Africa. Our representation at the COP was very effective. Yeah, it was a large group, but when the giant of Africa, we're supposed to send enough people, and we were well represented, and particularly, I was so excited when I saw that one of the first people that was hosted by King Charles was our own president, because King Charles has been an environmentalist almost all his life. So there's some encouraging signs.
Okay, thank you so much. And that's back here in the studio. Of course, quite a number of the issues that have been discussed and which Nigeria would subscribe to would need legislative backing. And you've been in the House and you've chaired at that time, between 2015 and 2019, the House Committee on Climate Change. How well are we doing? And I'm saying this because I want us to keep an eye on the result of mining, oil exploration in parts of this country, and such things as gas flaring and the constant shifting of deadlines.
Yeah. Excuse me. Well, your question is very much in order in terms of what we have been able to do or what the National Assembly is doing. Fortunately, when I chaired the House Committee on Climate Change, I sponsored the climate change bill for Nigeria. But it's also important to state that ever before the 8th Assembly, we had unsuccessful attempts. In the 6th Assembly, the bill was tried, it failed. In the 7th Assembly, it was tried also, it also failed. And even in the 8th Assembly, when I sponsored it, the bill passed through all the processes, went through the National Assembly bureaucracy, but when again it got to the table of the then President, he declined assent until I sponsored it in the 9th Assembly. And I had to engage in extensive consultations to eliminate all those problems that were, pointed out. And I must take this opportunity to thank the then Speaker, who is now Chief of Staff, Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, as the Speaker, who, as a member, had seen the failure in the 6th Assembly, in the 7th Assembly, and also in the 8th Assembly. I was very encouraged when he supported me wholeheartedly. And we pushed the bill. We reached out to the executive, to the then Minister of Justice, Minister of Environment, Minister of State Environment, who was also a champion, Chief Sharon Ikazo, Finance, even the then Vice President, and so many other persons. Before, by the grace of God, the meeting I had with the then Minister of Justice produced nomination of people from that ministry to help in drafting the law. So to cut a long story short, God was on my side, and my colleagues then supported me. Like I said, the Speaker then, now Chief of Staff, it was wonderful. Because everywhere I needed to go to for consultation and assistance, once I formed he would support me. So eventually, the bill passed through. And while we were in Glasgow with the then president, and where he committed Nigeria, he made a statement about Nigeria committing to net zero by 2060. There were efforts to actually stop the bill. But fortunately, when we came back, Mr. President signed it. But it's important also to clarify here that in the bill, because of our low position in industrialization, in growth, talking about 2060, we now said no, that we should be talking about hitting net zero between 2050 and 2070. And that's what we provided in the Act. And I'm happy that His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, he wrote an opinion which was published today. He clearly acknowledged that Nigeria has made a lot of effort, including, passing an act and then limiting ourselves, saying this is what we are planning to do. So the National Assembly has done its own and will continue to do its own, especially if there are areas where you need to maybe either make an amendment or pass a new bill or pass a new act to be able to tackle this. We were a bit comprehensive, in this bill. And I would like to say here that based on past experiences, and I'm happy that Professor Oladipo is here, based on past experiences, we structured the bill to ensure that the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is at the apex of the National Council on Climate Change, which is a creation of the Act. And that way, it's easy for the President to sit at top and to ensure just the way, that's why I said he has activated the Act, just the way he rallied all his aides appointees, and they were able to go and get something for the country. So as the chairman of that National Council on Climate Change, whenever he calls a meeting, it's going to be difficult for one super minister or the other to have an excuse and stay away. Because as the appointer of these people, once he calls a meeting, they'll come. And that's also going to eliminate what I now refer to as peer jealousy. Because with my experience when I was commissioner, the governor would ask you, go and do something, and your colleagues would create the impression that they were coming along with you. But midway, they will pull out because they do not want you to make success of it. So that element of peer pressure, which comes out of some interministerial meetings, have now been effectively eliminated with the president being in charge.
Anyway, we'll return to the matter of such activities like in the oil industry and how they impact the environment, contribute to greenhouse gases. And with Nigeria committing to reduce fossil fuels for transportation. We'll look at that in a moment. But let's take on this report. We have a number of reports. And this one, first, is from Lagos.
The takeaway from the recent COP28 in Dubai could provide unprecedented opportunities for the country. First, let's look at them. The $1 billion loss and damage funds promised by developed countries, commitment by Nigeria to eliminate gas flaring by signing on reduction of methane and leveraging on new technologies, the MOUs to launch solar PV manufacturing plant and also $150 million lithium battery manufacturing plant, and NNPC gas deal on floating liquefied natural gas.
These promises and commitment made at COP28, what will it mean for Nigeria? Let's start with Lagos.
In Lagos State, the loss and damage fund could help the coastal communities where ocean surge is fast eroding their lands. It can also boost the efforts of the federal government's Niger Delta cleanup. The MOUs and deals could help Nigeria fulfill its green manufacturing and industrialization targets. For many environmentalists, however, COP28 deals and promises need actionable plans, a blueprint spread of how the nation will utilize these vistas of opportunity.
What we should see the government doing now is harmonizing its policies, what to do in the short term, in the long term, in the medium term, in the long term.
Can we go to the drawing board, draw a program or plan of action to say 2024, first quarter, this is what we'll put in place. Second quarter, this is what we put in place. Third quarter, this is what we put in place.
The federal government shouldn't be the only one spearheading the implementation of climate actions and commitments. Environmentalists advocate that the 36 state governors must not fold their arms, but assist in adaptation and mitigation targets of the federal government. In Lagos, Larry Bileyi.
That report from Lagos. Next is another report from Enugu.
Issues bordering on finance and renewable energy were among those raised by President Bola Tinubu at the COP28 summit. The president opened up Nigeria for business in terms of climate change. An agreement was signed between Nigeria and Germany to improve Nigeria's electricity supply. This is a cheering news to Nigerians as they are hopeful that this agreement signed will soon come into reality.
God answered prayers in the person of Mr. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. We are hopeful.
While commending the political will seen from the leadership of the country, some public affairs and environmental analysts in Enugu said there is need to get countries who have made financial pledges to release the funds to address the impact of climate change.
What I want to see is a situation whereby some of these monies being donated, being generated by international donor agencies, where those monies can trickle down to Nigeria, to the subnational, to Enugu states, so that will begin to benefit. There's a lot to do in that regard.
On the issue of renewable energy, they opined that though it may take some time to do so, there is need to phase down fossil fuel and set action to limit global temperature rise to 1 degree Celsius, noting that Nigeria is on a trajectory of 3.0 degrees Celsius, which is not good enough. Hence the need for more mitigation and need to embrace renewable energy.
Climate change is a global issue, but it can also be brought down to the way it affects us. Like how do we deal with those issues that impact negatively on our soil as it affects agriculture? We have a lot of wastages that are of plastic origin, and they are impacting very negatively in our farms. So refuse disposal has to be addressed both in urban and rural areas, especially the dumping of plastics in our farmlands. With time, it's going to destroy our farms because it does not decay.
And coal was very, very vital in the Nigerian economy because it was coal that was used to produce electricity. To generate electricity, there cannot be industrialization without energy.
It was also the views of respondents that Nigeria deserves climate justice, and asking for climate financing will not be out of place. They also believe that Nigeria had a good representation at the COP28 summit and described the launch of the low carbon emission strategy by the federal government as a step in the right direction, which speaks volume that the future of Nigeria's economy will be climate friendly and pragmatic. In Enugu, Chinenye.
Well, three things I'd like us to keep our eyes on. First, apart from low emissions, I like us to also see, as we saw in one of those reports, gas flaring, cleaner energies, need for cleaner energies. And later on, we'll still come back to Honorable Sam Anuigo, because we would also consider the ravages of the Sahara. And well, he is on the Northeast Development Commission. We'll come to that. But let's hear your views first before we go on to Lagos and link up with Engineer Majakudumi.
Thank you very much. Let me just make some clarifications. Commitment to low carbon emission is not negotiable. But what I want Nigerians to understand is that it's not that Nigeria is saying that it's going to start reducing right away. We are not producing enough. This country cannot move in terms of development unless we really use our resources to power our industrial development. And there's nothing available currently that can help Nigeria to power that development unless it uses is a God-given energy, which is more or less fossil. What we are saying, and with all sense of modesty, I happen to be contributing to all the policies, the nationally determined contribution, even the low emission strategy that was launched in Dubai. I was one of the writers. So we let Nigerians get it clear. What we are advocating and what Nigeria is going along with is that we use our resources effectively in a very clean manner to power our industrial development, even if it means contributing a little bit more to greenhouse gases. Till about 2030, if we are really serious as a nation, and we put industrial development as the primary driving force for Nigeria to develop and be able to meet all its needs in terms of poverty reduction and others, coping with the population increase, let's power this industrial development rapidly. If it means increasing the greenhouse gases for a while, fine. But as soon as we're able to do that one, and using all the available new technologies that will be given from some of these crops that are coming out, then we gradually start to move and reduce till we're able to say whatever we're generating is absorbed by whatever we're creating in the area of afforestation, restoration of degraded lands, which are areas where whatever carbon we generate can be absorbed. And that's what net zero means. Net zero doesn't mean you stop, you don't use your energy, but rather that you use your energy, develop yourself as you are developing, but also remember that you cannot continue to do that because you have been contributing more. And then you create avenues for whatever carbon you are emitting to be absorbed. And that is, you balance it. So you emit and you absorb, and you're more or less net is zero. Not a zero emission. Right. Please.
Okay. Well, of course, fossil fuels are not just going to vanish overnight. And,
not possible.
And the argument at COP28 was really high, with OPEC having an input as well, and saying that it was an unjustified vilifying of petroleum exporting countries as being completely responsible for the damage, and that fossil fuels are just about the only agents of destroying the environment. But let's go over to Maja Kudumi in Lagos. And what do you make of this?
Oh, I'm very excited at the level of intellectual output that's coming from this panel right now. There's hope. There's great hope when we have esteemed gentlemen like our good selves there. However, it is an emergency. When we hear what the Secretary General of the United Nations has had to say, he said that mankind is waging war against nature, and this is suicidal because nature always fights back, and she's doing so right now. He said we're heading to a cliff, which is going to lead us to catastrophic consequences, and our foot is still on the accelerator. Wow, this is serious. This is unprecedented. 2023, as I'm sure you all know, obviously, is going to go down as the hottest year ever recorded by humanity. And that's on the back of about 4 other hottest years in the last decade. It's an unprecedented situation that we're facing. And it's so unfortunate that, our main source of not just energy, as Prof. so rightly pointed out, but our main source of economic sustenance comes from this fossil fuel. But there is a contention now that we should not be burning oil because oil is too precious to burn to produce energy. And if we think about it right now, so many things we have, even in the studio there, so many things we have come from oil derivatives, plastics, so many things, other chemicals, and many, many things. And it's a limited resource. So we have to transit. And as Prof said, if we can do it in 7 years, very, very good. But at the same time, for the sake of our children, because it's an emergency now, For the sake of the children, the least we can do is to ensure that the forest that we have, which is the main question, as nature's way, the incredible, miraculous activities of nature, the main question of this CO2 is the forest. We have to protect our forest. There's far too much forest destruction going on, and massive tree planting, and restoring of our mangroves, because the mangrove is one of the best sequesters of the CO2, and then fast-tracking the renewable energy system. I'm so glad that our minister came back with some very good deals. We're going to have a photovoltaic factory, a solar factory set up in Nigeria. So there's some very exciting trends, and as has been pointed out by our dear honorable there, Mr. President is heading the whole thing, and he's spearheading it. So no argument. You won't take any argument from anybody. For the sake of our children, for the sake of our future, I'm getting very hopeful and optimistic now. Thank you.
All right, let's look at the far north of Nigeria, northeast, and the loss of vegetation. And you just heard Maja Kudumi talk about massive tree planting, because there are so many things up in that, which have also had their own impact on life, the quality of life, and living generally.
Thank you very much indeed. Cyril, see, why we continue to talk, shout, and even disturb our neighbors about the devastating effects, devastating impacts of climate change is because before now we will say, oh, climate change is issuing warning shots. I have said repeatedly, there are no longer warning shots. We are seeing the impact, the effects right there. So if you talk about the northern part of the country, for a number of reasons, it is badly impacted. The same thing, just like Brother Majokodomi talked about, the coastal erosion, its impact, and equally the gully erosions in the southeast. So from up north there is no doubt whatsoever that climate change has wreaked major havocs. If you are talking about from Sahel, which pushed the AU to come up with the idea of the Great Green Wall, covering about 12 or so countries, stretching from Senegal, going to the east part of Djibouti, crossing Nigeria here, with so many states in Nigeria involved. So you now appreciate that, yes, this is a serious matter. Now, you look at that, the impact from Sahel, the desertification drought, the drying up of Lake Chad by well over 90% right now, because the last time we did a study and they brought a report, we used to say 2,500. It's less than that right now. And those who previously depended, the millions, maybe well over 30 million people from Nigeria, Chad, Niger, Cameroon, who were doing their ordinary things like fishing, animal husbandry, and farming, with which they fed their family. They no longer have anywhere to do their business. And a lot of them flowed into the cities where they were neither, tested journalists like Siri Stoba or Professor Oladipo or my humble self, but they were prepared to do anything to survive. And that's how, you saw the crime rates, move up, and they were available for anything. So that's how climate change has forced them into, the migration that they never planned for. And then they moved to areas where they now clashed with the original people settling there, crises. And it's one of those reasons why we included the National Security Advisor as a member of the National Council on Climate Change. Because if you cast your mind back, you will find out that the United Nations, as far back as 2009, June, passed a resolution saying that climate change has serious security implications. So talking about the North as a whole, you can see the impact. Then talking about, specifically about the Northeast, there's no doubt that the role climate change played on how the crisis just grew is very well known. So I am happy that efforts are being made. One, here we have the National Green Wall, working on how to plant millions of trees to be able to recover degraded lands. We also have the Northeast Development Commission. Apart from the specific function of reconstruction, rehabilitation, and the resettling of people from IDPs, the other side is also to deal with the ecological challenge as part of its mandate. So I am aware that the government itself and even people from the Northeast region and other Nigerians are aware that all hands must be on deck in tackling this menace so as not to allow it to continue with its problems. Because even the problems that were caused there, some of them have spread to other parts of the country.
At this point, I'd like us to look at beyond, official and state policies. Now, bring it down to the people. There's so many things, so many of man's activities which impact the environment. We had about, still from the fossil fuels, we have byproducts like plastics, which some countries have laid down a procedure of phasing out those plastic bags. And here, it would seem that the use of plastics for so many things, it's on the increase. Water sachets, shopping bags, plastics are everywhere, including the indiscriminate dumping of such. You go beyond that, we are degrading the fauna and flora as well. And forests are giving way. And sometimes I'm tempted to ask, where do you draw the line between development activities and care for the environment, especially when it comes to agriculture, where you need to clear land to plant? And so there's the struggle. Prof, just break this down for us.
Thank you very much. I think it's as usual, you always ask very cogent questions. But before I go straight to issue of plastic, I want to put certain things in context. We may not have enough time to come back to it. As a professional climatologist that has been researching this area for the past 40 years, certain facts are clear. Climate change is a reality. It has happened in the past. It's happening now. And it will happen in future. Even if all human beings are removed, the natural variability embedded in the climatic system will change from time to time. And the whole world should remember, and Nigerians should remember, that the whole of North America we are talking about now was under ice at one time, some thousands, some millions of years ago. The ice melted away. That's how it operates. Even if we shut down all our industrial activities today, what we have done to the natural atmospheric system that controls the climatic conditions is such that we have made it to be crazy, because we are putting so much carbon dioxide than it can absorb, and it's running mad. And that madness will continue. If we shut down everything today, will continue for a while. That's what we call the inertia factor. So on that basis, Nigerians should recognize the following. While we seem to be putting every lack of development on climate change, I don't think we have to re-strategize. Let us come back. The whole of northern Nigeria we're talking about, I had the opportunity of working in that region for 5 good years, where we're trying to do what we call integrated ecosystem management project across, right from between Nigeria and Niger, right from Kebbi all the way to Diffa, and where they are even currently now. Went through there, and it is very clear. Nigeria needs to re-strategize. Let's think back. If we just put everything on climate change, this is something we cannot stop. We cannot stop climate change. It's not like a driver. He says stop, and it's climbing. No. If we, and what we do in Nigeria is not the one that is actually reflecting what the climatic conditions are telling us. Climate is a global network. Even if we say we don't want to do this in Nigeria, what is happening in other places, we still drive the whole system, the oceanic system, the wind system, that produces all the rains. So if we recognize that one, what the natural conditions are telling us today is that the whole of that northern Nigeria, let's strategize. Climate change is a factor, it's accelerating it. But the inappropriate use of land by human beings is responsible for much of the challenges we're having. So let's come down to the people to guide and provide simple technologies that can be used for people to manage that dry environment in a sustainable manner like it's being done in other countries. If you go to Israel, they're not complaining about dryness. They're complaining about how to turn the desert into green. That's what, and I'm happy that the green wall is ongoing, but we need to go beyond the green wall to put all other issues, appropriate water management, appropriate agricultural practices, appropriate livestock management that will be able to help in an integrated manner to restore part of the area that's done. Once we're able to do that, then we'll be able to now start moving. Right. Now, concerning the issue of plastics, so a very difficult thing. A country like Rwanda has been able to put a law in place in which plastics are banned, more or less. I've not been to Kigali, but I understand that in Kigali, you don't see plastic bags anymore. Rather, you see paper bags that are for shopping, and when you go, you bring it. You have to buy the paper bag to shop. So you always remember to bring it along when you are coming back for shopping again. And those are the type of things. Nigeria needs a major problem of Nigeria is lack of enforcement of law. Even if the government of Nigeria says today, no more use of plastic, some people will still say, what the hell? And by the time 1 or 2 people are arrested after the first 2 or 3 months, you will not hear it again. Don't cross the highway. We have provided overhead bridge for you. Nigerians will say, no, I have to make it shorter. The first 1 or 2 months, people will be arrested. After that, no. So everybody will not obey. I think we need to really change that attitude that we have to agree. But we cannot do this thing without a very good action plan, without a very good national development plan that will take cognizance of the issues of climate change as a development challenge and address it from all holistic point of view, both from the plastic, from agriculture, from water resources, and everything we want to do. Climate change is a development challenge we must address properly.
There's also the other side, the loss of wildlife and certain, acts by humans as well. And some of them border on, they say, the survival. And people quote and say, look, these things were placed there for us as humans. So what are we talking, what are scientists talking about? What is Prof saying?
That's what the challenge is. Nigeria is projected to be about maybe 406 million by 2050. The same land area of 923,000 square kilometers, much of which is being used for building houses. And urbanization is taking a long chunk of it. When I was growing up, when the expressway between Ibadan and Lagos was created, you'd be scared to drive at night when the road came on. Today, you feel like you have not left Lagos by the time you are reaching Ibadan. We have, so how do we manage? I think this is the challenge, and I'm sure Mr. Majakotumi will say, this is the challenge. The population is growing. The land area is not increasing. We cannot increase it. How do we balance the thing? I think this is where the national development goal has to really put us. And I'm happy that one thing is clear now. Climate change is becoming a more important development issue now, because with the support from Honorable Sam, that we're able to get the climate change law and the National Council on Climate Change. And they're in the process of developing a national action plan. I'm only appealing to the council that when that action plan is being developed, all Nigerians must be involved so that they can give ideas as to how we solve this very complex, integrated problem that is affecting us.
Thank you. Well, Engineer Majakotumi, let me come to you with this and say, what can, because many people would say, look, I'm just an individual, and whatever I do is not likely to impact what we're talking about. So households will say, look, we can dump our refuse anyhow. We can use all the plastic that we want and dump it. It's just one household. It can't make much of an impact on anything anyway. And of course, we say we can eat up all the animals in the forest, bush meat, and then that's it, because they were there for us. Well, you see, what can individuals, what is the kind of sensitization that citizens need to begin to take these issues and saying that, look, they can own this fight to restore the climate?
Yes, this is a very key question. And that's typical of our star journalist, so very, very key. Well, I can only refer them to my experiences on the farm that I started about 40 years ago, which was agroforestry farm, which I started after spending a few years in Kenya and seeing how important nature is. And I planted a palm tree, I planted a mango tree. After 30 years, I've never seen mango come out of my palm tree. And I've never seen my palm tree produce a mango. And when I plant cassava, I know they harvest cocoyam. So that tells me that, yes, what you sow is what you reap. And possibly we need to now go into scripture and bring that out into people's recognition and realization that the scriptures are very clear. All our scriptures that are worthy of being called scriptures tell us very clearly that there are consequences for your actions. What you sow is what you reap. God is not mocked. The law of karma, the law of retribution is very, very real. And what we're trying to do now is even going to the leaders of the major faith groups. And we're having some very positive discussions with them to disseminate this information to their congregations. That we have been behaving too selfishly. We have been driven by too much personal greed. We are boosted too much by our ego, because we've known that, doing things, even throwing the plastic out there on the streets, in the back of our mind, we now know that this is not good. But a lot more sensitization, and I'm so glad that the primary media organization in Nigeria, in West Africa, NTA, is promoting this. We're seeing adverts on NTA, which is telling people to be very wary of what you're doing with the wildlife. You can't just eliminate them all. They're part of the web of life. And we need massive sensitization, because it's an emergency. It is a critical situation. They're calling it a crisis. And, I come from medical background, medical family. And I remember the times when they will call my father at 2 o'clock in the morning. They say, it's emergency, we have a crisis. So he's out of the house, he rushes there, emergency ward. And this is where we're facing with the very life support systems, the wonderful, miraculous life support systems of our planet. So we need to push it to people and say, look, believe what the scriptures tell you, do what the scriptures tell you to replenish the earth. Replenish the earth. And you can no longer have your, what I call the moi moi live calabash mentality. In days gone by, we'd be using those items, we throw them in the bush, they recycle themselves. But now it's a different scenario. And all of us, not just Nigerians, it's a global issue. And the wonderful silver lining that I see on this very, very dark cloud is that we all have to come together. We all have to come together. Humanity must come together and have a renewal of our minds in a far more positive attitude. So I'm encouraged.
Right, thank you very much. And well, we've just about run out of time on this segment of it. So I'll just ask you, gentlemen, to just quickly, in 2 minutes, sum up your thoughts on the outcome and implementation of the strategies of COP28. Honorable.
Okay, thank you very much. I've touched on a bit of it, and I think I've captured it, succinctly by saying that the President and Commander-in-Chief, who is in the saddle, who is driving, has set the pace and tone of how he wants the system to run. And there's nothing clearer than that, because once the head of a system sets the pace and tone and demonstrates it fully, I told you that all he has done, talking to his executive, telling us in the National Assembly in the budget speech, and then coming to attend meetings. Climate change is cross-cutting. It touches almost all the ministries. So everyone is on board, and I don't have any doubt that the report will be very, very useful.
Right. Prof, your final word?
Thank you very much. I think from my experience over the years, after participating in all these COPs, there's nothing wrong with the COPs. There's nothing wrong with, even if 10 million Nigerians go there, there's nothing wrong, in the sense that you get a lot of things out of it. What is wrong is that we have not been very good as a nation to do good for long. I hope this time, with all the whoos and cries about the number of people that went, the National Council on Climate Change will immediately try to do the following. 1, get everybody on board. 2, get the media to help in preaching this climate change a lot more, so that Nigerians can understand what it is all about and how we can really work together as individuals, as communities, as local governments, as states, and as a federal government of Nigeria to address, not to cope, to address the challenge of climate change to our development. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And Amaje Kudumi, your last word, your closing comments?
Absolutely. Very, very encouraging indeed to see what is going on now. There seems to be a realization of the seriousness of it, and we hope that this realization shall be practicalized. And if you want to get an example, check our Commissioner for Environment in Lagos, who is taking no nonsense. He is really doing the job well. Lagos is a city of excellence.
All right, thank you so very much, Desmond Majakudumi, joined us from Lagos via Zoom. Thank you so much. We appreciate your contributions to this program. Thank you. Back here, Honorable Simon Ugo, thank you so much. And Professor Ladugo, thank you. We'll take a short break here. When we return, we'll be talking about women inclusion in the nation's security sector. Stay with us. We'll be back soon.
The counsel of our fathers.
I will urge and advise our younger generation to use talent and brain to sort out problems, not arms.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation.
My advice to these young people is please do not take us back to those harrowing days. You probably do not know what it is.
I believe we have fought one civil war too many in this country. So those who experience it will run away from it.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show. NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
The counsel of our fathers.
I will urge and advise our younger generation to use talent and brain to sort out problems, not arms.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation.
My advice to these young people is please do not take us back to those harrowing days. You probably do not know what it is.
I believe we have fought one civil war too many in this country. So those who experience it will run away from it.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Right, thanks for staying with us. Now it's time for us to take a look at our second issue tonight, and that is talking about the inclusion of women in the nation's security sector. I'd like to go straight and introduce you our guests on this program. Let me welcome to NTA Tuesday Live Dr. Julie Sander, gender security expert, principal research fellow and training coordinator, Center for Strategic Research and Studies at the National Defense College, Abuja, who's on sabbatical to the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies. Thanks for being with us here.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Let me also welcome Professor Shedrack Best. He's a professor of peace and international relations at the University of Jos. As a sabbatical fellow at the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies. Good to have you join us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Well, the first thing we'll seek to find out is first put into context for us, Dr. Julie Sander, the position and the status of women in the nation's security sector. That's on one hand. And on the other, why this call? Is it that we're not seeing nearly enough of them in the security sector, or we're talking specifically about in leadership positions?
I think I'll start from where you ended. We really are not seeing enough of women in the security sector. So it's not just a leadership issue. And that talks to the status, what the situation is right now.
Right.
You know that historically, the security sector, particularly when you look at agencies or services like the military, you know that traditionally they have been male-dominated. But over time, of course, we've begun to see women, in the military and in other security services, but the numbers are still very low. Of course, you see more women in other security services like the police, the customs, the civil defense, and so on. But the numbers are still low, generally, not to even go to the issue of leadership. And, of course, there are many explanations for that.
Well, some would say part of it has to do with the age-long traditions of a patriarchal society, where you look at it, that the men go to war and the women stay home, and that's it. And so with all these evolving over hundreds of years, the society tends to think that it's only men who are cut out to go out and do these jobs. But these are all changing, and there are so many aspects of security now just beyond what we see in boots on the ground.
Absolutely, you're correct. That patriarchal, nature of our society, like you said, has been responsible for much of what we see. It's still with us. It's still with us, by the way. But there are certain developments in society that have forced a change. And it's not just in the security sector, but in society generally. If you look around, in the past, you would hardly see women perhaps as engineers or things like that. But as society has changed, culture is dynamic, things evolve, so that has changed. So women, many people are beginning to accept that women can go into the military and into other security services and offer, their services in support of national development in whatever career path they choose within these services. But because of these age-long, ways of doing things, our societal cultures and so on, it's still difficult for some people to accept that, even when there are laws or policies that actually promote the inclusion of women in these security services.
Right. Professor Best, women are key in many of the sectors, and not the least in the security sector. So to give us your thoughts on that.
Well, thank you very much. I think we need to appreciate the fact that the involvement of women in public life, in governance, in every sector, and indeed in the security sector is not new as such. In pre-colonial Nigeria, we did have Amazons in some of our polities, like the polity of the ancient kingdom of Zaria. And even in the colonial period, we had women leading genuine agitations. So it's not new. We, of late, have seen a lot of movements internationally trying to mainstream the place of women, not only in security, but in almost every sector of public life and governance. The United Nations has driven a lot of these, beginning with the women conferences from 1975 at New York's, at Mexico City, followed by Copenhagen, then Nairobi, and climaxed by the Beijing conference of 1995. And you remember that Nigeria made a very good outing at Beijing. Nigerian women were there. Now, looking at the security sector, the discussion in Nigeria now is no longer about whether women should be involved or should participate in the security sector, because today they are in all the services. They're in the armed forces, they're in the police, civil defense, and all the paramilitary services. There are women. The discussion is no longer about whether they should be. It is about the nature of involvement, the quality of involvement, and we are looking at how gendered these structures and these institutions are in terms of their goal delivery, in terms of their ability to achieve best results for this nation. And for these services to achieve their mandate, as a matter of fact, when we talk about women involvement or gender, we are talking about holistic and total development, because security is one sector, but there is no sector where you are looking at development that we can belittle the role of women and the issues of gender equality. So for us in this country, we are part of a global system. Internationally, the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, for example, has tried to mainstream the role of women in peace and security. And a lot of this instrument has been domesticated by so many nations, and the principles are being developed, which is the result of which you are finding that in many countries they are increasing the proportion of women who are enrolled in security services. And in Nigeria, Nigeria is part of Resolution 1325. We are also part of the Maputo protocol. We are part of a series of other international instruments like CEDAW, the Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. We are part of the Beijing platform. We also have national laws like the Child Rights Act. If you put all of these together and then you bring Chapter 4 of our Constitution, which looks at human rights, and when you talk about human rights, it includes gender rights. So there's a variety of instruments that we can leverage on. But now we are looking at how not only these instruments, but how the instruments establishing the Nigerian security services can be improved in terms of legislation so as to make it more comfortable and more productive for women to give their best in the security services.
As it is now, what would you say are the impediments to greater participation of women in this sector?
Well, the impediments are many, and many of them are born out of, will I say, age-long practices and beliefs that people have, about the role that women should play in society. And so even where you find that there are women in the services, some of the discussion or the debate is around what kind of roles should they actually be playing, in the service. If you have women in the military, for example, should they be in combat roles? Should they not be in combat roles?
Right.
And we're beginning to see women in combat, but it's still, at very low levels, because even though the gender policy, for example, says women can, get into any units of the armed forces that they want to, you still find that in terms of practices, there are still certain barriers. So you won't find anything on paper that says they cannot go into those roles. But then there are certain mindsets that people have, that actually, limit the extent to which women can go. And these mindsets actually translate into, certain practices or measures on ground, that impede them. And then because of the wider societal way of looking at some of these things too, you find that in some places, there's actually a reluctance, to allow girls from families or from societies to go into some of these roles, in our security sector. So these are some of the challenges that we face.
I'm looking at a situation here. Would you push for a review of certain laws or conventions regarding women in these agencies? Because I don't know if this still is the practice, but I have heard in the past it used to be, even though I may not mention, that one of the civil security agencies where women are not even allowed to, if they must get married, they must write an application to the headship, and that's not the same for men. It's a convention. And would you allow that kind of convention to still persist in 2023?
You want to respond to that?
Well, I think really, let me go back to the earlier question you raised about what impediments women face. The impediments are institutional, they are legal, they are structural. A lot of them are entrenched in our value system. Let me take the legal as an example. All our security services are established by law, by acts of the National Assembly. For example, you have the Armed Forces Act, you have the Police Act, you have the Act establishing the Civil Defense Corps, and all of them, they have their respective laws. And if you look at these laws, they are absolutely silent about anything having to do with gender equity, gender equality, and you would not find a procedure for something as fundamental as sexual harassment. And there is silence, deafening silence about the issues that are critical, command positions, whether these be gendered or gender neutral. You are not going to find anything about retention, recruitment and retention. You are not going to find anything about promotion and training. Nobody would come here to argue that you promote people on the basis of sentiment and tokenism, or that you lower the standard. No. All that we are trying to say is that everyone should have the same equal access to the opportunity for enlistment, for retention, for promotion, for appointment, for posting, for deployment. All of these are gendered, and these are the points where you face impediments, where you face discrimination, where you face inequality.
Do you think this is deliberate?
I'm not in a position to say that it's deliberate, but it's a form of gender blindness. And because we are discussing this, we believe that such blindness should be taken away. If we think it's deliberate, then we have to find who to blame. And apportioning blame now we need everybody's understanding and cooperation and support for this to be brought to national debate. You know, the issues of gender can be quite sensitive. You find people becoming defensive. People misunderstand it as if you're trying to raise women to take over what men do. It's a gross misunderstanding. That's not it. As a matter of fact, the more women have access, the better the quality of development. The statistics shows everywhere. Where you hinder your women, you retard your development in very significant ways.
There's always this argument, especially when it comes to affirmative action. And some would recommend, in order to bridge this gap, or move women into the rightful positions, not just merely in the security sector, but almost all the security sector inclusive. There's always this argument that, what do you do in the short term? Do you, for instance, take what's referred to as affirmative action? And there's also the argument beyond that to say people should, beyond that, they should earn whatever positions. And that when you begin to do that, you inadvertently give the impression that the women are not up to the task of being in those positions. So they put themselves forward, and you can always look for the best to put in there.
I don't think affirmative action has ever meant bring someone who is not qualified. It has never meant that. That even in the target group that you want, you know, to give better access, you know, in terms of affirmative action, there are qualified people, and that is what you target, you know, when you do affirmative action. But having made that general point, you know, in the security services, it's by the nature of the job, it would be very risky to take someone who is not qualified and say in the name of affirmative action, then you are giving them those positions. The argument, you know, sometimes against affirmative action is this kind of argument to say that you bring people who are not qualified and so on and so forth. And then, you know, to also say, yes, there are no qualified people, that's why you make do with whatever is available. In every sector, there are qualified women. In every sector, there are qualified women. Professor Best said, you know, we shouldn't toe the line of saying it is deliberate. Sometimes I think it is deliberate, this gender blindness. Sometimes I think it is deliberate because there are qualified women in every sector, and even in the armed forces and the security services. If you open up like you should open up, you know, take away gender blindness, deliberately, intentionally deal with gender blindness, there will be women who are interested and women who are qualified and women who can go through the training that is required for them to attain those positions as well.
Sometimes when these actions are taken and when people put forward these arguments, it ends up in, you started talking about it, tokenism. How do you avoid tokenism?
I think the security services are the wrong place to even find tokenism, because by the standards that they use for recruitment, by the high caliber of their training, by the standards they place to, I mean, it's easier to get into an average Nigerian degree program than to get into a defense academy, for instance. The conditions are tougher, and a lot of women who enroll, they meet those conditions. Then you have the intellectual, you have the physical, you have the character, you have all kinds of components brought together. And by the time anybody goes through that, what we look for next is that there should be no inhibition in terms of access to further training, access to promotion, access to postings on account of gender. This is the kind of thing we are looking at. And there are some of the laws that hide these injustices. They make it possible for people to get away when they create obstacles and ceilings for people or for security personnel on account of gender. One of the things you asked earlier on is about whether anybody is looking at the laws, and the answer is yes. The answer is yes. I'm aware that the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies, working together with UN Women, already in all of the services, they have gender policy. There's a gender policy for the armed forces now. There's one for the police, there's one for the civil defense, and all of these have been brokered and powered by UN Women working together with the implementing partners. The UN Women is also working together with National Defense College, and the reason is, the purpose is to increase gender awareness, to create a platform for further gender equality within these services. And so it is going to continue to get better. But you know, a policy amounts to nothing when it's not implemented. And a law becomes just but paper when it's not implemented. And that's why it calls for a variety of stakeholders and actors and participants to give life and to give expression to whatsoever framework, whatsoever legal framework we have in place. But just to let you know that the Armed Forces Act is being discussed with a view to making it more gender inclusive, more gender responsive. And that's the same with the Police Act, is the same with the Civil Defense Corps Act. And we believe that when this is done, and you don't just do it by fiat, you know, you have to engage the stakeholders, the services themselves and the legislators and all the other consumers, other people who are involved with these services. What we're trying to do is to strengthen the gender responsiveness so that we can have better services, a people-oriented security sector.
Just like Professor Best said, these legislations or statutes would amount to nothing if they're not implemented. But even before you get to that stage, the sensitization, changing attitudes is extremely difficult. And for a society like Nigeria's, with various cultural barriers to women, how do you propose to go about this? For instance, families would get up and say, listen, I know families who would say that you want my female children to go into the security sector, especially with what's happening now. Some hold those views and they hold them fast.
Sure.
So how do you begin to walk through that, change the mindset, while you have an eye on amending, reviewing legislation, and then going further to ensure implementation?
Sure. Part of the project that we're actually, on now, that Professor Best mentioned, that, both the Defense College and Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies are implementing partners. Part of that project is community dialogue. Because, and like Professor Best mentioned, there are multiple stakeholders that must be carried along. So community dialogue is a very important part of this project. And this public discourse is part of it also, part of the strategy. Actually, earlier today, we were in a public dialogue session, which is continuing tomorrow. So these are some of the kind of things that are being done to engage, the wider community, not just the security services, so that, in the wider society, you begin to influence, mindsets of people. But then within the security services also, we're doing a lot of sensitization programs, with security services, their workshops, their seminars, all kinds of things. Actually, this is the second phase of the program. We haven't just started. So the last 2 years we've been on it, and we're continuing, because like you said, it takes time. So you don't just do it one time and stop. So there are things that have been going on, projects that are going on in terms of sensitization and targeting different levels, in the security services. There are some that deal with the leadership. There are some that deal with, rank and file. There are some that do with middle level, leadership and so on. So different programs have been packaged, for the duration of the program. This particular one, I think, is 2 years as well. And then, we start again. So this is part of the efforts that we're undertaking. Of course, in engaging the leadership too, we've also undertaken some strategic advocacy visits, to the leadership of these different services. Because, and just a word on the policy, another thing is, it's one thing to have a policy. The problem of implementation is that most times the people who should be implementing are not even aware of the contents of the policy, you know, or how to even go about it. So part of what we're also doing is to actually sit down with, you know, relevant officers and units in the services to look at the policies, you know, item by item, and say, how do we implement, you know, this aspect? How does it affect us going on? So these are the kinds of things that we're doing.
Prof, some people would ask you and say, looking at the current state of security or insecurity, if you like, in Nigeria, what are those areas you're thinking we've been doing this the same way over time? And like you've noted, we have not included, you know, other genders. It's been a male-dominated, male thing. And there are people who strongly suggest that we might just be overlooking the key to unlocking, you know, these issues we have.
Well, you're right, absolutely, Cyril. You know, the security services, uniformed services, especially when you talk about the armed forces, is a highly masculinized profession. And this is the story the world over. We're looking at statistics of gender distribution of personnel, and we understand the United States is at 18% female enrollment today. In Nigeria, we are told we are at 10% of female enrollment. In the Civil Defense Corps, the National Bureau of Statistics puts the percentage of female enrollment at 25, even though a large number of this 25 is at the bottom cadre of the service. But it is in the same Nigeria, we know that women are now being admitted into the Nigeria Defense Academy. And the moment you enroll women in the NTA, you will be ready for a 3-star general very soon, a 4-star general very soon, and we should also begin to brace up for a chief of army staff who is a woman. We should expect commanders who are women. Interestingly, in the course of our interaction, I've come across women in the infantry corps who are brigadier general in the infantry corps of the Nigerian Army. In the past, you would not imagine that this could happen. So this kind of disposition shows that we must brace up for a future where women involvement is going to increase. But that's not the end of the story. We are coming from somewhere. In the past, women were only found largely in the medical corps, as either as doctors or as nurses, all right, or in the education corps, or as teachers, school teachers, or school administrators, but not as combatants. But we know that lately, women have been in combat roles in the Nigerian military. But if you go deep into the military, this is a very controversial and contested issue about the role of women in combat operations. It's a contested issue. And the moment you begin to contest it, then it means you are encountering gender roadblocks, gender ceilings, gender-based kind of apprehension. And as a nation, we are aware of our cultural factors that inhibit a free understanding. And I think that this is where sensitization is very important, because, you know, some would think that, you just think we should push women to go and fight, just to make it look simple, to make it look cheap, or you think that it is easy. We can just deploy women to combat. No, it is not. We are no soldiers, but we are very responsible Nigerians, and we know that what we need is a balance, and to take away all the obstacles. If people have been trained in the same set, male and female, they go to fight, the risk is the same for the man as it is for the woman. And we believe that our system should be able to tolerate a situation where there is equality for both male and female security officers in Nigeria?
Dr. Sanda, I should put this to you, and beyond raising awareness, and you're looking at the other side. So it's very easy to say, well, it's male-dominated, and perhaps you appeal more to the men to give the same space to women. But do you find a commensurate interest among the women folk being in these professions, like the security services?
Yeah, well, commensurate. I mean, since it's something that is just opening up, you cannot have, you know, that high a number, okay? So like I mentioned, you know, some of the sensitization actually goes to community levels, because we also have to deal with mindsets at community levels, at family levels, that will allow the, you know, the girls to be able to aspire.
In fact, and the girls too, to understand that I mean, they can come out, and aspire to
have a career, a successful career in the...
Yes, and actually one of the projects we have in this program is a mentoring. It's a mentoring program, so that, you know, you encourage young girls to see that there are opportunities here and that they can aspire. And then for those who are starting, you know, in their career, for them to be able to see that there is a career pathway for them, you know, which will appeal and, you know, fulfill their yearnings. That, you know, whatever roadblocks or obstacles are on the way, that they can be helped. Whatever resistance is on the way, they can be helped to still see a pathway, you know, going forward. So there's a lot of work. It needs to take also the wider society, like I said. But culture is dynamic. Culture is dynamic. It evolves, it changes, and we've seen that change in our society in so many ways. There's no reason why it will not happen in the military.
Well, mine, some of our cultures are deep-rooted and they're slower to get out. But Prof, yes, as an academic and as a man, when you discuss these issues, do you get rebuffed sometimes? Because I know I've had to do a program before where some of the men said, you see, when we begin to discuss these issues, it's the men who say, look, what are you promoting here? That the women should take over from us, just like Dr. Sanda said in her opening comments.
Yes, it happens.
But sometimes they say, why is a man championing the cause of women?
You know, Cyril, it's men who have deep insecurity that would talk this way.
Right.
Because if you don't suffer a complex or a kind of insecurity, you should encourage women to fly to their highest potential. But we are looking at security as a function of the state. And security is so important to be allowed to suffer this kind of gender blindness and gender exclusion, and for the legal frameworks and the institutions to be gender hostile. There's a lot that is going on and a lot that is hidden. Even for, okay, take the Nigeria police force. This is a service that, you know that a lot of women are enrolled in the Nigeria police force. But when you look at the command structure of the police force, there are no women in command positions. When you look at how many of them are commissioners of police, you're not going to find them. How many of them are
just
AIGs,
very few this time around,
in charge of zonal commands?
And usually you see where you find the female commissioner of police in charge of a state. People just, you know, their eyes go pop and say, "Whoa!"
Exactly.
I mean, as if there's something unusual about it.
And yet there are some of the most efficient and some of the most brilliant officers, because they're able to investigate well, they're able to win the confidence of the people. If you want to actually popularize the police is your friend, I think you do it better with female police officers. It works better with female police officers. If you are looking at maintenance of security or internal security operations, where you have joint operations between the security services, it is helpful. The more women you have in these positions, the better. When are we going to see a female Inspector General of Police? When is that going to happen? I hope soon, sooner rather than later. These are some of so the feeling that the women are coming to take over has always been there. But this country is for everybody. It is not wired for anybody to take over from anybody. It is wired for every gender to contribute its quota to its development. And that is what we are talking about. It's not about any gender taking over. It's about allow each potential to be maximized in national development. And gender is a cross-cutting development tool that you find in every area of human development.
And, you know, talking about gender equality and equity, when you look at the security services, I think the security services, perhaps more than any other sector in this country, ought to resemble the society it serves. So you cannot have a male-dominated security service and say that you are serving the society well. Your service is definitely hampered. If our societies are not, you know, just one sex, say just men or just women, then our security services that, you know, serve those communities must resemble the community, particularly in Nigeria today, where we have these internal security challenges, and our security services have to go into communities to render, you know, security to the people. They must resemble the societies into which they are deployed.
All right, let me just state here that the phone lines are now open, and means you can get to join in the discussion in the studio. The numbers to call will be on your screen. Take advantage of those. And let me quickly remind you, as I always do every Tuesday, that if you call it in and your call gets through, do us a favor, turn down the volume of your TV set. That's the way to avoid the hurlback or the echo. And we also encourage you to go straight to the point so others can get on the platform and air their views. So keep those calls coming. If you get those numbers in, and you might want to raise issues, this is a topic that we need to look into, interrogate in so many aspects. So keep those calls coming through, and our guests here would be too willing to respond to such issues as you might raise. Well, in pushing this advocacy, I have to ask this. Have you set targets, you know, to drive this and say within this period we should have, you know, covered all of Nigeria, or we should have covered the main, you know, stakeholders in this and raised awareness? And we're looking at, well, if you're reviewing legislation, you say to yourself, maybe in the next 6 months we ought to have arrived at a level where we can begin to push for reforms, or maybe a year. What targets have you set yourself here? Okay. Oh, okay. All right, just before we go there, we have a first caller here, Gift from Benin. Hello, Gift. Okay. Gift, can you hear me? I could hear the hurlback, so turn down the volume of your TV. All right, okay, sorry. You might have to call back. Okay, so just go ahead.
So in terms of the work that we are doing, you know, the advocacy and so on, actually, interestingly, last week, you know, we had a workshop, you know, with certain relevant, you know, officers from the security services, where we were developing work plans together, because it is not for us to go implement for them or set timelines for them. So we had a workshop where we were developing work plans together, which we were able to, of course, we built in a monitoring and evaluation framework so that we can follow up on this together and see where we are going in terms of, you know, the things we have agreed that we need to do in the next 1 year, for example. Okay. So we looked at different things. We looked at what was realistic that we'd be able to do in 6 months, in 1 year, things like that. And then, of course, we understand that a lot of it also you need to take back to headquarters and get clearance, you know, and all. Yes. Right.
Well, another call coming through. Ifeanyi from Lagos. Hello, Ifeanyi.
Hi, hello.
Yes. Yes, go right ahead.
Hello.
Hello, Ifeanyi, go ahead.
Yes, I've been following the program. It's very interesting conversation around women women participation in our security services. So I think my question is very simple. I commend what you guys are discussing. I'd like to ask, why can't they start from technically for the legislative side? So let legislator dictate how, when, and what number, and how everything should be able to pan out within all the security forces. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. If I get him correctly, he is looking at the legislative angle.
Why don't you just start pushing for a law to say this?
Yeah, actually, the part of the work we are doing is together with UN Women, we have done a research which is to review all the laws that established these security organizations. And what we are looking for are the gender gaps that are in these laws to see if they can be improved and if these gaps can be filled. We have done a report of this research, and we brought the report and presented it to all the security agencies affected. They were invited, and actually from their highest commands, we've engaged the security chiefs. Some of them have sent representatives, some of them have come in person to interface with us. And what we've tried to do is to present this to them. In a validation meeting, we have looked at the gaps, we have debated them. Some have gone down well, some are still in discussion, as you would expect. Now, the role of the National Assembly or the legislature is critical, because when we talk about law, lawmaking is a function of the legislature. And we have, interestingly, the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies is under the National Assembly, and it's a capacity builder for the National Assembly. It also provides technical assistance for legislation for the National Assembly. And so we do a lot of research that supports the National Assembly to strengthen its laws and to deepen democracy in Nigeria. So it's within this mandate that we're doing this assignment. So we've done some of that, and it's work in progress.
All right. Another caller, this time from Port Harcourt. Christian, calling in from Port Harcourt. Go ahead.
Okay, good evening, good morning.
Right.
I'm enjoying the program, and then I want to thank the resource person in the studio for their contributions so far. It's a good topic because women, generally, when you look at the security personnel, most times when you see people on the road, you hardly see women standing on the road. And where you see women, either it's in the offices and other places. But if you look at the situation of the country, the culture where we live in, some people don't see it like women should be part of any military or security agencies because of the way the culture and the belief. I am of the opinion, like what the other caller said, the National Assembly should look into it and pass a law. And then also look at the act guiding these agencies and how to amend the act to bring in policies that will encourage young girls to participate in the security activities of the country. Like the other person said, women contribute a lot in security and in every other aspect of this country to progress. So as she said about the sensitization, I think it should be handled like taken down to the local government, set up these agencies that will talk and sensitize people, the community heads, so that looking above culture and tradition, we can bring in women into the security outfits of our country. That's my contribution.
Well, thank you very much, Christian from Port Harcourt. Thank you.
They're talking about culture. You know, Nigeria is a diverse country. We have so many subcultures in this country. But what works for us is for us to develop a national culture that is consistent with global best practices, with what obtains in other parts of the world, because we are not an island. And it's not to undermine our cultural system, but it's to actually strengthen it. So our culture, you know, which culture are we going to take as the Nigerian culture when it comes to policing? The police or the civil defense or the armed forces, they have their own institutional culture. And what we do is to make them responsive to these cultures, to serve and to defend these cultures, the productive elements of these cultures. But we're talking about the legislature. We have been working with the legislature, as a matter of fact, with the members of the National Assembly. We have had series of engagements with them. We have presented some of the findings to them. And in fact, we are engaging the legislators on more than one area of reforms concerning the security services of this country. Right. And in fact, it has started in the 9th Assembly, but it ran out of time. They couldn't complete it. So it's going, we believe that it will go to the 10th Assembly, and looking at these laws is very critical to us, and we will continue to engage the National Assembly until we have these laws strengthened.
Okay. Amos is calling in from Taraba. Hello, Amos, are you there? Okay, we lost the call from Amos. We have Hussein from Abuja. Please go ahead. Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Right, go ahead.
Mr. Cyril.
Yes.
It's a pleasure having you here, and so you've graced the TV for a very long time.
Okay.
The topic is a very interesting one, and
right.
when it comes to security, everybody just assumes the armed forces immediately, forgetting that there's something called cyber security.
Right.
Yes. Now, there are women in the armed forces, in the ICT departments, that handle cybersecurity and all of these things in other outfits, security outfits. Now, the last caller made reference to creating a platform of educating these girls in rural areas on security and all of these things. One of the best ways to do this is for, like Professor Best, for them to host a symposium, a security symposium, maybe titling it Women in Tech and Security with, as the word defines it, women in tech and security with brains, right? Now, having a symposium, you get to showcase the women in the tech industry, and you get to showcase the women in the armed forces in these departments that are never recognized, right? Now, you can link it to educating or creating a mentorship program with the girls in the rural areas, like the Girl Education Platform, with this as a symposium. So that's my submission. And Mr. Seal still again, it's a pleasure, sir.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your call. Thank you. Well, so suggestions coming in on the way forward. Yes, that.
Worth noting.
All right.
But you know, the future of security is going to continue to change.
Right.
Even in the armed forces, there's resort to artificial intelligence.
Right. So
drones do the fighting.
That's where we're going to now.
You need more of your brain than physical confrontation.
We have female drone pilots.
Exactly. And you have combat pilots in the Nigerian Air Force now who actually fight. So some of these fears that we have may just be, may be taken care of by the nature of warfare in the future, by the nature of security, the nature of policing. It will continue to be driven by technology and by some of other factors that we have not even seen yet.
Well, some might argue and say to you that, well, Nigeria isn't doing too badly. If you say the figures show like the United States has a 20% enrollment and Nigeria has 10, they say, oh, that's the big United States.
Well,
so
Cyril, that's a claim. I don't know. I cannot tell you that.
Exactly.
Because we do not have gender disaggregated data in
So that's another that's another problem too. You do not even have the data.
We don't have the data. But the one that you can hold on to is the one published by the National Bureau of Statistics on the Civil Defense Corps. It's a younger service. And so it enjoys the benefit of having data, having information. And that's why the National Bureau of Statistics
so
put up.
this clearly shows that there is a yawning gap when it relates to the armed forces, which are much older, and the data such as this.
It's actually the nature of these services, not, it's a lot of the information is classified and restricted, all right? So there's no way of independently verifying what exactly the proportions are.
And you know, the civil defense is a relatively younger organization, so they had the benefit of hindsight,
That's
if you like.
Oh, well, as we prepare to wind down, let me just ask you what your closing comments are on this, and how you're taking this advocacy.
Well, advocacy has to continue. There's a lot of resistance.
I know. Yes, okay, you did say that you had started some of this in conjunction with the military. How receptive were they to it?
So this is actually why I'm saying there's a lot of resistance. There is, and while I say there's a lot of resistance, I must also balance it by saying that there are many we've met who are very, very receptive. And at least like on the advocacy visits I mentioned, we went to the leadership, they were extremely receptive. Because for you to enact a gender policy, the leadership has to have accepted, So that's a major strategic instrument that we have. But going down the line, then you meet the implementers. That's where you meet resistance, with some of the people. So we have to continue. Many of them, of course, like Professor Best said, is because they don't know. There's a lot of gender blindness. So you have a different strategy for them. Those whom you meet and you think that they're being deliberate, you have to adopt a different strategy for them. But it's something that must be done. Nigeria cannot be different, and the reality of the security challenges we have in Nigeria today dictate that everybody must be carried along. Inclusion is the way.
Right. Prof, your closing comments?
I agree there's resistance, but it's driven by a poor understanding of what this thing is all about. Because nobody is trying to dislodge any gender for another gender to take over. It's for the common good. As a matter of fact, I maintain the ground that Nigeria stands to benefit enormously if we allow gender equality principles to drive the way our security services are wired and take out all the hindrances, every manifestation of discrimination on the basis of gender in our security services. We'll have more efficient, more people-oriented, and more Nigerianized security services.
All right. Well, thank you so very much. I just on that note, we must leave this conversation. Professor Shedrack Best, thank you very much for coming.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And Dr. Julie Sander, it's been interesting talking to you.
Thank you very much, sir.
And thank you, too, for being part of the program. Next week, we'll be back with NTA Tuesday Live. I'm Cyril Stover. Bye for now.